Have you ever wondered how to move beyond just staying sober to truly loving your life in recovery? In this episode, we're joined by a remarkable guest who transformed her own journey of sobriety into a mission to help women build confidence and embrace life beyond addiction. Stay tuned as we explore her insights on overcoming trauma, breaking free from anxiety, and discovering the joy that comes with a confident, sober life.
Welcome to the Sober Life Rocks podcast. You may have made the decision not to drink alcohol, or at the very least, not at work-related events. Whether you've never been a drinker, are in recovery, or made a health-related decision, we see you, and you are not alone. In today's world, networking, socializing, and celebrations often happen over drinks, and the struggle can be real. Through this podcast, we're changing that narrative. We're here to create a community where individuals like you, who choose not to drink or drink less, can find camaraderie, support, and practical advice.
Before we get started, Sober Life Rocks is hosting a conference, Amplify Sober Voices, on January 15th, 2026, where we're bringing together influencers and speakers, writers, and podcasters to reimagine what a truly inclusive, alcohol-optional world looks like. And if you're interested in being a part of this growing movement we're seeing, we would love to have you join us. Learn more at amplifysobervoices.com. My guest today is Shelby John. Shelby is a licensed clinical social worker with a private practice where she specializes in trauma, addiction, and anxiety. Oof, love that. With years of experience in the field, she provides therapy and coaching to individuals and is the happy host of the Confident Sober Women podcast. After getting sober, she became a fresh, authentic voice in the sobriety space, showing women how to build confidence and love their lives beyond recovery. Shelby is a mother to three, the wife to one loving man, and has been sober since July 1st, 2002. Shelby, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Margie. It's been wonderful to get to know you a little bit on my podcast. Thank you so much for being there. And now we get to share here. Thank you so much for having me.
I know, it's super exciting. It's like I enjoyed being on your podcast because you just have such a joy about you. But I know it wasn't always that way, right? Yeah. So I'd love just to hear a little bit about your story and kind of how you came to be where you are today.
Sure. So I have been sober since July 1st, 2002. When I wrote my memoir in 2021, I said, if you live long enough in life, everybody will have at least one time, usually more, where there's a before and an after. And so that is like my point so there was like a before July 1st, 2002, and then my life after that. And that's kind of how that's kind of the definition of my life today, because they are two distinct, thank God, and I hope other people see that, distinctly different lives. So, I was just a regular girl in a family. I grew up in a family. My mom was young. My biological father, left our family when I was 5 and my sister was 2. My mother was very young. She didn't have an education or like a lot of education. I wasn't working at the time, and it was completely devastating. And so that, I think, was maybe my first sort of pivotal moment in life, the before and after. I didn't know it at the time, and I didn't know it until truly many years, I think even into my own recovery, because it really set up for the trauma neuropathway with the negative belief called, I'm not good enough. So I basically, internalized that experience and that belief about myself that I'm not good enough, unbeknownst to me, obviously, as a kid. And kind of my brain just built that track, right? Created that neuropathway, got deeper and deeper and deeper. And that became, I think, the defining trauma that led to, like a raging addiction. So I just grew up, my mom got remarried to another man who raised us, who was our dad, thankfully. And that was a wonderful thing. And they had another child who's my brother. And we were a loving family, and just like more normal stuff in the 80s, 70s and 80s growing up. But I was always that girl who was never good enough, never smart enough, never pretty enough, never thin enough for any particular group that I was in. So I was an athlete, decent one. I don't know that I was like amazing, but I was pretty okay. I was in the popular crowd in high school, although I don't even necessarily know if I knew that at the time. I had the boyfriend who is now my husband, which is interesting, but I don't recommend that. But he was like the perfect guy who was the smart one and, the rule follower and all the things. So I I was checking off all the boxes, for life, according to the way that I was raised and what was expected of me. I was the oldest of the children. So I kind of just paved the way and did all the things I was supposed to do. Very quiet to myself. Wasn't expressive about any feelings, but of course, generationally back then, it wasn't really a thing. So, I kind of lived that way in high school. Definitely some things were coming up for me when I was younger around that not good enough piece. And I started to become very aware that that was my story, that I didn't fit in, with anybody. I didn't feel comfortable in my own skin. I was looking for escapes. I didn't really start
Isn't
drinking.
that so interesting? Like you just described this whole life that every high schooler would want. And
Right.
yet you felt like you weren't doing it right.
Right. Yeah. Right. And,
Amazing.
somebody once told me another, I think, a psychologist, actually, I think, who wrote a phenomenal book about teenagers and drinking or substance use. And her focus was a little bit more on prevention. I believe I actually interviewed her on my podcast a couple of years ago. And she said something like, if you are hanging out in people's basements with people you grew up with your whole life and know, but you need like substances in order to do that, like that's an indicator to you that like something is wrong. Like, why do you need to be drunk or using things to hang out with people in their basement with kids you grew up with your whole life? Well, because you don't feel comfortable, right? And so I didn't know, this is all, I think just so funny about life too, how more is revealed to you, right? I didn't know any of this, I can speak about it now because it's been decades since then, and I didn't know that that's what was happening, but I do know that I wanted to die. I got books from the library about how to kill yourself. My mom found them in my room one time, and I think she was probably alarmed, but of course I was like, oh, I'm just, just because you're reading about it doesn't mean you want to do it, I didn't even remember that until like a little while ago in my life. And I was like, oh, wow, that's like, if that happened in my home, I would be extremely alarmed, but things, are a little bit different. So anyway, I did graduate from high school. I was a kind of the best, the girl doing all the good things. My parents were very strict, so I didn't really drink or use much in high school because I was afraid of my parents, so we weren't allowed. They had a lot of rules. And then I went off to college and I went 6 hours away because that was the max that my parents said I was allowed to go. And so there I was in North Carolina, completely out of control, with no real resources emotionally or even a lot of life skills. Honestly, I grew up in like a nice community. And now I'm faced with managing all of this kind of things on my own. And I just started to drink and found all the people. And it wasn't very long. I think my drinking career was really only like 10 years or less, but it was not good. I was right from the start, the girl that just like never could just have like one beer for sure. I was always blackout drunk, like wasted, like always looking for that, like never wanting to leave the party or never wanting people to leave my parties. Like, oh, why are you leaving? And because you're like, well, it's 1 a.m, and you're like, no, let's not. So I was just that kind of thing, but it didn't last long because I got taken out, I think, kind of quickly, which was probably a blessing for everybody. But so, that went on and on through college. Somehow I did manage to graduate from college, which is a miracle. And then, I went to work and then did a thing, and then we got married, and I created this life, and nobody really knew any of this was going on because I grew up with a lot of people that drank very similar to me, maybe not the same, but pretty much the same, but it wasn't really the same. So, to me, like drinking was a big, big part of our family, our culture, and our community. So it's like what everybody did. I was just always extra. And so we just partied it up and did the things, and nobody really knew there was anything really wrong. People did know though, apparently, because then they would make comments. Like my mom would say things to me that my husband always had big jobs, and we would go to these events and things, and she'd say, try not to like drink too much, don't drink too much because it's embarrassing, for your husband. So there was obviously signs that other people knew there was something wrong with me. Um, Fast forward, the end of my drinking was pretty dramatic. I didn't really have any consequences prior to that. I never got in trouble, although I'm sure I should have many times. But at the end, I was really strung out. Like I had problems with food, and body image stuff, lots of eating disorder issues related to that. I would just anything I could do to kind of control my environment. I somehow made it through graduate school. I went to graduate school for social work. I had to have straight A's. I was a perfect, it was like all of this ridiculous. I can't even believe how I did it. I don't know. But other than I got sober, I've graduated in May and I got sober in July. So I don't know, whatever, maybe how that worked out. But the end of my drinking looked like me at a conference in Washington, D.C. for the Department of Social Services, where I worked at the time in foster care with hundreds of other social workers, also some young people being paraded out of that giant keynote speaker room, in front of all of these people by policemen. And I had no idea why. So I talk about that in my memoir. You can read all about it. I don't want to spend our time doing that, but it was very dramatic. And yeah. And then I think the best part about that whole story for me, everyone's always like, well, what happened? I mean, and I don't usually publicly share the details of any of it. I was able to work it out, which is great. But the best part or the most impactful or influential part to me sometimes now that I never, ever, ever want to forget is sitting in the attorney's office. We got this fancy attorney down in Washington because that's where it happened. And, he was like, oh, you should go to rehab. So I did that. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I'll do that. I had no idea, no desire. It wasn't like, oh, I want to get sober. Oh, I have a problem. Oh, no, they were like, no, you're going to do this. And so I did that because I was terrified. And I turned 27 in rehab. And 2 weeks I was there, and I just convinced everybody around me that there was no reason for me to be there, and my family was gonna come get me. Clearly, there's been a mistake. I didn't even unpack my suitcase, but nobody came to get me. So I had my first spiritual awakening after 2 weeks of that rehab situation. It was my birthday, and I was sitting on outside in this beautiful environment, and kind of just, I don't know what happened. I kind of cried out to my God or whoever, whatever at that time, asking for help and support and guidance, and just my first, I think, surrender. So that was my first sort of spiritual awakening experience to the best of my ability at that time. And after that, I was able to engage in the program and listen to the message. I heard the words. I was able to be a little bit more oh, okay, fine. I might as well just listen and learn something. I wasn't sitting around saying oh, I'm an alcoholic or I have a problem, but I at least was engaging. So anyway, I got out of that. I started going to AA because that's all we had back then. And I was too scared not to. So I went to meetings every day because that's what I was told to do. I got a sponsor. I followed the program as it was designed. It really worked for me. I didn't have any other reason to believe that it wasn't. There was nothing else. And then we had to meet with this attorney to talk about this situation. And so I went down there, this really fancy Washington, D.C. office, and we watched the interrogation video that was done while I was in jail, for that 72. And it was 45 minutes long of me with, I have no recollection of any of this, by the way. Two officers interrogating me about the situation, and me just continuously saying that I wasn't drunk, that I didn't have that much to drink, that I understand how much I can drink and how much I can't, and why I wasn't drunk, and why that wasn't part of the story, and blah, 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 blah. There was no, hey, I didn't do the thing. It was just about that. And so I think that's one of the pivotal moments for me that helps me understand who I am and what I am and the truth about that. And so I'm really grateful for that, because that just helps me to realize this, just in those moments, because we will all have them. I don't know, Margie, if you still do, when you're thinking well, maybe this isn't really my story. Maybe I can kind of drink like normal people now, or you have that smell that goes past you, when someone's drinking a glass of wine and you're like, oh, it's been 22 years, I have those moments to draw back on now, and I can sit and think oh, hey, remember that time when that thing happened, and so I'm really grateful for those experiences today. So to just fast forward, I stayed sober. I went to the meetings. I did all the things. It was very hard. I spent about 18 months saying I didn't belong here. I'm not a part of this. I don't want, but I was just too scared not to because my life was getting
Mhm.
better because that does happen. And I was trying to restore my marriage. And then finally, there was like more acceptance over time. And after that first year, really 2 years, I was a slow learner. I feel like I sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. I was still 10 years sober, standing at the podium, celebrating my anniversary. Very pissed off that I wasn't further along in my journey, that I still had to work this hard at life. I got sober, and 6 months later, I was pregnant, and then I had 3 kids in 4 years. So that was just a lot. I did a little bit
Mhm.
backwards because now I'm parenting, and I wanted that, but it was a lot. And so then I always share too, like around year 4. I had what I call my first sober bottom. So I was not
Mhm.
disconnected from the program or doing the things, but I was kind of. And so I just wasn't actively involved in a recovery situation as much as I needed to be because I was doing the parenting stuff. And also there was all this other stuff that needed to be healed that just hadn't been yet. So I had that kind of moment of standing on my back deck, and I was crying, and I was like, what, I need somebody to help me. And I mean, I was literally like kind of like at the end of my drinking. It was the same thing. And I reached out to my sponsor at that time, and she said, we've been waiting for you. So I was so thankful to have people to call in my life too. Somebody who was like, listen, like who knew what I was talking about, who could say like, yeah, come on back. Like, we'll help you. And that's what I did. So, since then I've layered on all the things I've done lots and lots of therapy, lots of marriage counseling. I have these kids. Our teenage years were just, a nightmare. COVID and teenage years for us were just really, really horrible. And that sent me down another path, right? I was 20 plus years. So I don't know, whatever that was, calculated out, 20 years sober. Right. And then I was in a hot mess during that time. I mean, just really bad. But I had to be there for my kids, who needed me, who were also struggling a lot, and show up for them and like be there and like do the things. So thank God I had a foundation of such good skills and people in my life, although I would say I didn't necessarily utilize as many of the people as I should have. But skill set really to be able to know that I have to solve the problem. Like, am I going to be in the solution, or am I going to be in the problem? And some days I was in the problem, but most of the days I chose to show up and be there for my kids because they were in a time of dire need that we sustained for about 4 years. Right. It's a
Yeah.
little bit better now. A lot better, actually. And we're on the other side. I am a therapist. I work in private practice. I see individuals, and I do EMDR therapy, which is a neurologically based form of trauma treatment that helps us to reprocess kind of old and disturbing events and those negative beliefs that I just referred to that you mentioned, like negative
Mhm.
thinking patterns. And then I also
Well,
do,
I'd love to dig in. I'd love to
yeah, I
dig
do
into that a
EMDR
little bit because,
intensives, and then I have a remote neurofeedback program as well. So all of those are such incredible opportunities for people to kind of heal their brains.
yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing that story. It hurts my heart to think about. You and I share a very similar situation, which was the not feeling good enough and the not having a parent who was capable of holding up a mirror and saying, "Look how beautiful you are! Look how wonderful you are!" Like my mom just didn't have that capability. She was in her own alcoholism, but so today, I've done a lot of work around that area. But I would love it if you could just share maybe some tips, some ideas about when we have those negative thoughts, because I think that sober or not sober, right? Just because we put down the drink doesn't mean that those thoughts not magically go away.
Mm. No, they don't. Sure. So I like to think of it as a kind of a process that's multifaceted. And so the first thing that I tell people to do and to really commit to is doing what I call a thought inventory. So if you've been around like 12-step meetings or programs, you kind of are familiar with the term inventory. And what that means is to basically begin to notice in your regular life what the negative thoughts are that consistently come up for you. So, like, what are the things that are running in the background in your life? So, is it I'm not good enough? Is it I'm not smart enough? I'm a loser. I'm a failure. I'm not safe. I can't do anything right. I always mess things up. And just start to notice that. So, like, just begin to like kind of go about your day, and then just jot them down and kind of say like, oh, I was having this experience, and then I noticed that I had this thinking around, like, here we go again. I'm just not good enough. Because then you'll have like a little bit of an understanding. And sometimes when we write things down and then we look at it, it makes it a little bit more like we can take some action now. Like we can see, we're like, oh, I can see this now. So for most of us, we're going about our life and everything's fine. You're going about your day. And then, the phone rings and it's the principal, and the principal's like, your kid did blah, 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 and then so it's the thing happens, right? So immediately because of the thing, we have a thought, right? And the thought might be, there we go again. Why is it always your kid? Like, you're such a bad mom. You're this, you're this. And then, so if we think of it like a triangle, the thing happens, the thought is there, and then that thought leads to feelings. So then you feel like crap, you start to feel it in your body, even you're sick to your stomach, your chest is tight, you're sweaty, you're anxious, you're like feeling, disappointed in yourself, all the things. And then those feelings then lead to behaviors. So then behaviors look like overeating, over exercising, lashing out in anger, saying the mean thing, withdrawing, becoming isolated, things like that. So what we want to do and have the ability to do is to disrupt that triangle at the top. So when the thing happens and then the thought comes in, we want to be able to disrupt that, like right at that top point, so that then it can change the way that we feel and then change the way that we behave. Is this making sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. So once we know what a lot of our thoughts are, and then we understand that thought triangle of like, oh, okay, this is how this pattern works, we can start to be able to assess how can I gently shift away from that negative thought or belief about myself and into something that's a little bit more positive. So I'm not saying like, oh my gosh, I'm the best mom ever, or, like I always make the right choices. Like, it doesn't have to be very dramatic. It's just a soft, gentle shift. Okay. So we want to get out of that negative cycle and into something that's a little bit more positive. So, even though this is happening right now, I know how to take care of myself. Or even though I made this mistake, I did 100 things really well today. Um, even though or I can do hard things, or there's sort of like affirmations, I guess people are familiar with that term. And what I encourage people to do a lot of the times is once they have that list, that inventory of their negative beliefs, you can kind of look at that and almost use it as like a frame of reference to come up with the other version of it, right? So or do it your own way. But I do like people to have them kind of at the ready, like written down, maybe in your notes, or like take a picture of it. Because when you're in like the mode, or
I
you're like,
literally have one right here
yeah,
at my
like
desk. Yeah.
it's really hard to come up with that stuff, like when you're in the middle
Yeah.
of the thing, right?
Yeah.
So having it available, particularly for somebody that's vulnerable to like kind of acute, anxiety or something, you want to have those things available to you. So that's kind of the process that I try to live by, and that I teach people, because I think sometimes we think I think it's not true. We think that we don't have any control over these things. Now, I don't think that we have control over our feelings and our thoughts that come in. We don't. I think things, they are fleeting. They come in like the wind and they go out like the wind. Like I have very strange thoughts a lot, right? And I didn't think that up. It just came in, but then we do have the opportunity to use our brain power and our ability to, because we have such developed frontal lobes, to take control of that situation to impact our feelings and behaviors.
Okay, so let me give you a real life scenario that, we Sober Life Rocks, we really focus on people in their professional lives.
Mhm.
And I talk to a lot of people who are secretly sober at their jobs, which is totally fine. That's great. That's a personal choice. But let's say that the boss is saying, hey, as a celebration, we're going to go to happy hour, or for team bonding, we're going to go on a bar crawl, or you go to some events dinner, and the first thing everybody hands you a glass of champagne.
Mhm.
Now, all of these things are exterior events and nobody yet is judging, but I know a lot of people feel that just like sixth sense of, either I'm not going to fit in or I'm going to be miserable or it's going to be uncomfortable. So these are all like thoughts, negative thinking.
Mhm.
So how can we use that triangle to kind of interrupt that and still go into a situation that's not going to necessarily be sober inclusive?
I love that. Thank you for that question. And I do think that is a very real situation for so many of us. And especially since we live in a society that's still obsessed with alcohol, even though that is changing, it still very
Mhm.
much is. And you're right. If you're newly sober by choice or for whatever reason, or maybe even not new, but you just, you encounter these things and it's still secret, it can be challenging, right? So I think that the way that you realistically can combat that is to do exactly what I just said. So, A is to really understand. So, in your process of getting sober, you probably either worked at this job or you've been, so you've been there for a little while. You understand the nuances of this particular environment and what's being asked of you. So there is some ability to prepare. You have the option to think about these things a lot of times before they come up. So I would encourage people
Mhm.
to do that, to spend like a little workshop it out with yourself, right? So give yourself 15 or 30 minutes or whatever you have to just think about this. Okay, when I encounter the happy hour, how am I going to handle that? So preparation is the key to success in most all things. And so when you think about it, okay, and maybe the negative thought comes in like, well, I'm a loser because I can't drink, or I'm different, I don't fit in. You
Mhm.
can say, even though I don't drink, I can still have fun. I can still make an impact. Even though I don't drink alcohol, I can still be engaged in really good conversation, or I can still be a good friend. Like whatever would work in your situation to help you see your value in a group or in an environment or party that doesn't have anything to do with alcohol, right? So I think that switching it into that mode will be very, very helpful. And then once you have a few of those affirmations, kind of playing it out in your head. Oh, okay. So when somebody says, "Oh, what do you want to drink?" And you're like, "Oh, I'll have a club soda with lime," or whatever. And I think most of the time, most people don't care about that. But I know, and you have shared that sometimes people do make a comment or they say, um, something, you can immediately, or even if they don't say anything, even if you think they are, and immediately that thought is starting to creep in, you can go right back to what you just did and say, "Oh, even though I don't drink alcohol, I'm still valuable, or I still can have good conversations." Does this make sense?
Totally makes sense. I love the idea of having those positive voices put in place before you ever get there. It reminds me of a story I heard somebody share one time. She said when she was a little girl, she was, I don't know, 5 or 6, and actually played the piano quite well. And at her church, there was some like famous singer that was going to be coming. And the famous singer found out about this little girl who could play the piano and said, "Oh, could we do a song together?" So it was a big deal. And the little girl was so excited. And her parents were sitting in the front row. And she goes to walk on the stage and tripped over some kind of cable or something and landed splat on her face. And the entire church went, "Ooh." And she remembers looking over off the floor and just seeing these horrified faces of the entire congregation and her family. Well, fast forward, she's now a speaker. And
Wow.
so every time that she walks on a stage, her whole body floods with that childhood feeling of everybody being horrified that she splatted on the floor. So she now has learned that before she gets on stage, she recalls all of the standing ovations that she's gotten.
Hmm.
And so when that flooding moment comes, because it still does, she goes,
Mhm.
"Oh, hello, old friend. I'm going to play the standing ovation tape right now. And then she's able to walk confidently on the stage. And so I love what you said because it's the same thing. Like I am 20 years sober and I, to this day, go to a lot of conferences and people say, hey, let's go meet at the bar. Mm-hmm. And as I'm walking up to the bar and seeing all the people all happy and with their drinks and stuff, and I just have that feeling of I'm different or I'm not part of, or I'm somehow going to be judged for not having the martinis and the whatevers. And it's all my stuff. It's all the old tapes. And so I love the idea of just knowing that's going to happen. And as I'm walking up, going, oh, hello, old friend. Today, I'm going to play the tape of when people love having conversation with me.
Yeah. I think that is beautiful. And like I said, I think preparation is the key to success in so many things. And we really minimize that. And it's also, I don't know how much it's taught like as an actual technique for success and things. Now, I mean, obviously in school and stuff, you're like, oh, you should study for your tests. And, there's preparation there, but, and obviously, and then there's the other version where you can become obsessive too. Like you can develop some extreme anxiety and things because you're constantly like need to know what the outcome is going to be and you're playing it out. Now, I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about more of like a gentle understanding about certain things so that you're not completely taken aback. Now, you can't anticipate every single thing that's going to go on or every person you're going to run into or every comment. Now we get hit with that stuff, right? Like you will be out somewhere and like the person will say the weird thing, or they'll flat out ask you, well, why don't you drink? Like, I honestly don't even think that's ever happened to me, but I was never necessarily secret with my alcoholism, but like, I think that can be weird. And so then you're like, oh, okay. So it can be awkward, I think, at the first time, so we can't prepare for everything, but where we can prepare, I think it's just helpful. It's just good personal, it's good self-awareness too, to be able to be like, how is this going to feel for me? And then also you're using that discernment to decide what is best for you in any given thing. Like, so maybe, when you do this kind of work and you think it through and you give yourself the pause, right? I kind of talk about that a lot, like give that pause and then like, okay, and we can reflect, and then we can respond. When you give yourself that pause, you might decide, like, you know what? Actually, this is just not the best thing for me to do. Like, I'm not going to go to that. I mean, so that's a choice that can come from this kind of work because we don't need to be at every single event if we don't want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the last thing I wanted to kind of say on that was that some of these things we've been talking about are just like interrupters, but I also learned early in my sobriety to play the tape forward. What do I mean by that? I wanted that one glass of wine. I wanted, like you said, the thing walked by and I was like, oh, I want that. And so I learned to then play that tape forward. Well, what would happen if I had that one glass of wine? Mm-hmm. And what would happen then? And what would happen then? And so I think that the same can be done positively. Like, what happens if I go to this happy hour and I don't drink? Mm-hmm. Well, I will be aware of all the people I'm talking to. And I will actually have more interesting things to say. Yeah. And I will remember who I talked to the next day. And I won't do those stupid things that I used to do. Like, I can build up the self-confidence of all the good that's going to come out of it versus all the negative that I can swirl around in.
Absolutely. I love that. I mean, I think that's the work that comes from doing this sort of emotional sobriety work that we do in years 2+, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
I say 2 to 5 is like a big time, but like it continues happening. And where you get the real value of, yes, we can work on self-awareness. There's lots of tools. I teach it in my stuff. You do. There's lots of tools for that. But then where you really get a lot of the change and real value is when you do that, like you do some really good therapy. Personally, I like neurological approaches because it heals the brain. So then those negative beliefs literally aren't even there anymore. So now you haven't erased the memories. You don't have amnesia, but you no longer have the emotional stimulation that comes with certain events. So then what happens is the forward thinking, the future template is way different, like kind of what you're saying. So then when you think about, oh, when I have to encounter my ex-husband to drop off the kids or whatever, you're no longer getting any kind of emotional reaction at all. Whereas before, you
Nice.
couldn't even do it. You were so angry and you were pissed and so
Mhm.
that's the benefit we get when we start layering on the other tools of recovery, yes, but also just, how do we deal with being a human? And I personally think that is the best thing, right? Because that's where you're going to get the real healing. And yeah, like I think thinking about the benefits is critical. You made me think about when we go on vacation with the family and my whole family, like my parents and the whole thing. Sometimes you go to get like they get like a huge, beach house or whatever, these big houses.
Mhm. Mhm.
We've done it a couple of times. And the first time, and again, I've been sober a long time. I don't have a problem being around alcohol. It doesn't really bother me. I know how to take care of myself and what I need to
Mhm.
do and different things. But they roll in and it's like, I mean, it's literally like a liquor store. Like, I mean, I was like, wow, okay. Like that is a lot of alcohol. Like, and then I just would watch, like even my husband who does drink a little bit, like not a lot, but like we would just watch them like every night, every day. And I'm like, my God, like how are you even alive? And then I would just say, I'm so thankful that I get to sleep and wake up and I'm going to go for a run in the morning. I'm going to feel so good. I'm going to be able to do, some work. Like I knew I was going to feel great, you know,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
probably were not.
Yeah. Absolutely. Shelby, you've shared so many really interesting and cool things. If somebody wanted to learn more from you or work with you, like what does that look like? How can people connect with you?
Sure, you can just go to my website. It's just my name, shelbyjohn.com. That's my therapy website. So, like, all of my services are listed there. Obviously, therapists can only practice in their states of licensure, but I do have that neurofeedback program that's available to anybody. I have a coaching site too, you can list if you want. It's just shelbyjohncoaching.com. That's where you can get information about my podcast, my book. I have a Facebook group too. It's called Confident Sober Women. If anybody wants to
Oh, cool.
join, follow me on socials.
Amazing. Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I mean, your insight and reminders about all of this is that like sobriety or sober choices really isn't just about quitting drinking. It's about building a life that you love. So here's my challenge for all of you, our listeners. Take one step this week to strengthen your confidence, your addressing those negative voices. Like just do one thing to turn the script around and celebrate yourself. Maybe it's taking some new action or setting a new routine or some new thought pattern. Whatever it is, take some action and own your own growth. And if you're ready to take it even further, join us at Amplify Sober Voices on January 15th, 2026. We're going to bring together all of the sober leaders, storytellers, and change makers. And if you want to have a voice in the sober space, if you want to be a speaker or a podcaster or any of those things, get all the details and register at amplifysobervoices.com because Sober Voices is all of our superpower. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.